Yesterday, they announced some pretty big buffs to Stormbringer Enhancement Shaman. They are giving Tempest a massive buff, 30% more to the primary target and 25% to its AoE damage. This is quite nice because Tempest has felt pretty weak this season in terms of its actual damage. And then there are also two smaller buffs, one to Awakening Storms and one to the Critical Strike damage node that is in the Stormbringer tree. Note that it is Critical Strike damage and not Critical Strike chance. Now, I've done a lot of rough math on logs for how these buffs will affect us. Looking at a breakdown from my 16 Rookery today, the Tempest buffs are quite notable, giving me 4% overall, and then another 1% from Lightning Rod. Awakening Storms and Stormcaller both add up to give me an extra 1%, putting my total at a 6% dungeon overall buff. Looking at a single target boss in that dungeon, my Tempest was again at 4%. Lightning Rod wasn't very notable, but Awakening Storms is a bit stronger. Altogether, it seems that my single target in dungeons is also up 6%. Now to look at the raid build, I didn't get a log because not many people have been playing this tree in raid, so I just took my sim. And because you get a lot more of your breakdown from Storm Strike and Elemental Blast in this build, the Tempest buff only amounts to about 3%. Making the total increase in raid about 5%. So to keep it short, this buff is 6% in dungeons and 5% in raid for the current builds of Stormbringer Enhance. Now there has been a lot of debate on whether Stormbringer or Totemic is better in keys. I know El Broblio is rank 1 right now, playing Stormbringer in every dungeon, and I think right now I would say that the trees are close. I think Totemic does better on things like large AoE pools like Cinderbrew, while on other pools, I think the trees are both doing similar damage pre-buff. On single target, I also think both trees are close. There is a bit of a misconception that Stormbringer is higher single target, but I think that's mostly because it would pull ahead on a boss with Ascendance on pull. But I don't think it really pulls ahead by a significant amount. An advantage of Stormbringer is that it benefits more from PI, but a disadvantage of Stormbringer is that you have to play around its cooldowns more, and there are a lot of dungeons where its cooldowns don't really line up super well. Now to look at sims. Firstly, a sim for dungeon single target. Actually, So's Totemic currently has the edge. After these buffs, Stormbringer would have the edge. In an AoE sim, Totemic is ahead and will remain ahead. And to look at raid sims, my gear setup currently has Stormbringer simming at 5% below Totemic, and the buff is 5%, making them roughly equal on raid single target. Note that most raid bosses aren't single target, and I think Totemic has better damage profiles for a lot of them. And with PI, Stormbringer will definitely be ahead of Totemic, but it's nothing like it was last season. And looking at the BIS profiles confirms that both trees will be within 10k DPS of each other on pure single target. So the big question is, what tree do we play? I think you can safely play either tree. I think the decision might end up being dungeon based. I think Totemic definitely has some concerns with uptime and needing mobs to be stacked, whereas Stormbringer has its own requirements around Tempest and its cooldown management. But all in all, both trees should probably do similar damage. Potentially Stormbringer might pull ahead. Maybe there are some different talent builds that could be tried. I think the No Ascendance build is completely dead now, considering Tempest is buffed. Potentially more points in Elemental Assault might be good. I'm not entirely sure. I will be trying out a lot of Stormbringer next week when the buffs come in.